What is offensive realism and what is defensive realism? Let's talk about them. Kenneth Waltz, he considered as a defensive realist, and Mearsheimer, we take him as an offensive realist. Defensive realism, or in a defensive realism, state acts to ensure their security, states acts to maximize their power because they want to ensure their survival. So basically, when we talk about defensive realism, we try to dig out that what compels a state to act in international system. And according to Kenneth Waltz, states, they are inherently are security conscious, are security maximizers, because the states, they have to live in an anarchical environment. Kenneth Waltz explained that the international system is anarchical, and obviously that anarchy increase the state's concerns regarding their security, and those concerns compelled a state that it built its military might, it gathered more and more power. So states, according to Kenneth Waltz, are defensive realism. States, they gather maximum power, they collect maximum power to ensure their survival, to ensure their security. On the other hand, Mearsheimer, he presented the idea of offensive realism, and he disagreed with the Kenneth Waltz on this ground, that states, they maximize their power because of their security concerns. He believed that maximization of power is something inbuilt in state gene. He gave an example of a superpower, that United States is a superpower, and all of the competitors of the United States, they are far behind the United States in terms of military might, in terms of their economic GDP, and in other affairs. Even China is far behind the United States when we compare both the states in terms of military might or soft power, or in terms of hard power. China is far behind the US. You know, the annual defense spending of the United States is around about $700 billion, and annual defense spending of China is around about reaching to $300 billion. Even less than the half US spend on its defense. So we were talking about offensive realism. United States, as such, they don't have any sort of immediate security concerns, or no actor is able to threat United States in this world. Still, United States is maximizing its power. So why United States is doing so? When they don't have any kind of security threats, why they are maximizing their power? That was the point which was raised by the Mearsheimer, and he believed that United States is a unipole of this world, superpower of this world, and they don't have any immediate security concerns. Still, they are increasing their military might. Still, they are multiplying their power. So the essence, the things he draw from the behaviors of the United States, that states are power maximizer, not a security maximizer. Maximization of power is something inbuilt in state gene. State don't maximize their power because of their security concern. When a state is not facing any kind of security concern, still that state go for a maximization of their maximization of its power. This is called offensive realism. So on this ground, Mearsheimer keeps a different point of view than the Kenneth Waltz. So for Kenneth Waltz, states, they are security maximizers. Their security concern, it leads to the power maximization. And for offensive realism, states, they are by genes, they are power maximizers. Okay, without any sort of security concern, they will go for maximization of their power. So this is the two variants of realism. Two variants are two camps of the realism. And when we talk about the fundamental beliefs of the realism, which has been shared by the all school of thought of realism, whether it's classical realism or new realism or new classical realism. Mainly we have four different variants of realism. First is a classical realism, then we have realism, then we have neorealism, and after that we have new classical realism. Classical realism refers to a work of Thucydides, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, and Thomas Hobbes. Their works refers to a classical realism. Then the work of E.H. Carr and the Morgenthau, okay, it refers to a realism. Okay, the first sound foundation of a realism provided the work of E.H. Carr and Morgenthau. Then Kenneth Waltz, since Kenneth Waltz, the era of neorealism or structuralism started. And you know that in 1979 Kenneth Waltz presented his work, and after neorealism, another offshoot of realism is neoclassical realism. The work of Mearsheimer, which he presented in 2002, and work of Fareed Zakaria. Fareed Zakaria is Indian American. Both Mearsheimer and Fareed Zakaria, they presented their work in early 21st century. So their work refers to the new classical realism. So we have four offshoots of realism: classical realism, realism, neorealism, and new classical realism. All of these four different offshoots of realism, they share few fundamentals. Are they share few the things which are common among those four variants of the realism. First is self-help. Or before going into self-help, we should discuss statism first. Statism is a principle that in international system, state is the only legitimate primary actor. Okay, rest of the actors, like different international organization, different NGOs, non-governmental organization, different multinational companies, okay, their role is secondary. Okay, when we say state is a principal actor, okay, this concept leads to the statism. What kind of when we believe that state is a primary actor, what is its implication for the international system? When you believe that state is a primary actor in international system, it's mean you are negating the importance of the other actors, okay, which are present in international system. And when you believe that, when you believe on statism, in other words, its implication is quite severe, quite serious. Implication of statism. When you believe state is a primary actor, it's in other way you are acknowledging that state is supreme. Okay, it's supreme than individuals, then others actor which is present in international system. And for the survival of state, anything which states do, okay, that is legal. Because state is a primary actor and state has to survive. And rest of the institutions, we can do compromise on them, but there is no compromise on the survival of state. This is the implication of statism. And for the survival of the for the survival of itself, or for the security of itself, states can do anything. Even they can violate international law, they can violate human rights, and you know, states generally do. They violate human rights violation, they violate international law. Take an example of Israel, take an example of India. Again, they are openly violating United Nations resolutions, they are defying their advices or recommendation to obey human rights. They are in a course of defiance. So, and this is if this is something legitimate. Okay, that's what statism says. Now come to after statism, second main principle after statism and its implications. Second main principle is self-help. In international system, no state can be relied upon for the security. In other words, no states can outsource its security, or no states can do compromise on its security. States always try to secure themselves, and in this course, basically they increase their military mights, and the weaker states, which can't afford a heavy spending on their defense, what they do, they form alliances. So states generally adopt different means to ensure its security. Obviously, the states can't overlook its security concerns. So self-help is another system, and when you attribute self-help with the international order or international system, its implications are like that a security dilemma, it exists in us, it becomes an inseparable part of the international system. Security dilemma is a concept which we used in international relation. Security dilemma, in an easy way, we can define like that: step taken to enhance the security of one state's decreases the security of the other states. If a state it takes steps to increase its security, on the other sides, those steps has been seen as a security threat to another states. And if a state increases its security, the security of the other states will decrease. This is called security dilemma. And security dilemma further leads to an arm race, the kind of arm race we experienced in a Cold War time period between Soviet Russia and America, the kind of arm race we are experiencing between Pakistan and India. So second main principle of realism is security dilemma. Statism, security dilemma. Third main principle of realism is survival. What does survival mean? I think all of you are familiar with the Darwinism. And what are the social implications we have a Darwin theory. Let me recall. The social implication of the Darwinism is survival of fittest. The individual, the unit is stronger, it has to survive, and the entity or actor which is weak, he should be wiped out. And so survival is something essential for our states, and they maximize their power to achieve that goal. In classical realists like Thucydides, Sun Tzu, Thomas Hobbes, Machiavelli, they were believed that power is an end itself. Power is a destination. Maximization of a power itself an end. It's an objective. But when we talk about new realism, realism of Kenneth Waltz, he disagree from the classical realist classical realist on this notion. He believed power itself is not an end. Power is a mean to an end, and the end is survival. So states, they maximize their power to ensure their survival. So when we talk about the survival, classical realism survival takes in a different way, and neo-realists, they take survival as a different way. Kenneth Waltz believe that survival is a end goal. It's an end goal. States, they maximize power to ensure their survival. So these were the three principles which are almost common in all the variants of realism we have. And let me repeat those principles. Those principles are self-help, survival, and statism. After this short overview of realism, let's move to liberalism. Before going into detail of liberalism, first let me allow to get rid of few misconceptions we have about liberalism. Generally, when we talk about the liberalism, the things which comes into our mind, that liberalism talks about cooperation, liberalism talks about peace. It's a very apparently looks very appealing. No doubt, liberalism talks about cooperation. They talk about the peace. They talk about the global change, etc. But that peace is not is not for the weaker. They talk about the peace, the kind of peace which suits to the stronger interest. Liberalism basically presented another side of the story. Our attribute generally which relate with the foreign policy is stick and carrot. Stick refers to a coercive steps, and carrots refers to a financial benefits or financial incentive. So what is sticks and carrot? A stick is something which is which relates to the realism, and carrot is something benefits or incentives which relates to the liberalism. Realism, whether it's realism or liberalism, they both are exploited ideologies. They exploits the weaker, and they both favors the capitalism. They both favors the capitalism. They both are exploited ideology. Both the ideology, whether it's realism or liberalism, they sports the interest of our stronger states. As such, liberalism is not something, the concept comes into our mind that it promotes the human rights or a more friendly world. It's not like that. Liberalism is another form of exploitation, but the means of exploitation in liberalism we use, that are different than realism. In realism, for exploitation we use coercive measures. States, they go into war, they go into war, they launch they interfere in, via their military into the affairs of the other states. So in realism, for exploitation, states generally used coercive means. But for liberalists, or in liberalism, they believe that states, especially the stronger states, they can exploit weaker states by using peaceful means as well. And they believe, liberalism believe, that peaceful means make exploitation a non-offensive, and by coercive measures, exploitation most of the time become offensive. And for liberals, they believe that exploitation is essential. Exploitation is there, but they generally used peaceful means for the exploitation. They quote the importance of the international organization like World Bank, IMF, WTO, They are exploiting the third world countries, they are exploiting the developing countries, but their exploitation means are different. Okay? They are exploiting third world or developing world by lending loans to them, by uh, drawn heavy interest from them. Okay? So liberalism or realism, okay, these both are different sides of capitalism, but the strategies they propose for maximization of powers, those strategies are different. The objective, the end goal is the same, because that is the maximization of a power. So neoliberals, they talk about cooperation, peace and global change, because they believe that peace, cooperation and such soft spoken concepts make exploitation more easy as compared to a coercive mean of exploitation. When we talk about the assumption of the liberalist, they keep a positive view of human nature. They believe that human natures can be cooperative. They believe on a progress. When we talk about different variants of the liberalism, the most earliest form of the liberalist, they were called sociological liberals. They basically highlights the non-governmental ties among societies, non-governmental ties among individuals and other non-state actors. They talk about the cultural exchange. I'm talking about sociological liberals. They talk about the cultural exchange steps. They talk about the confidence building measures. They talk about the people-to-people contact. So when we talk about the non-governmental ties, okay, this refers to the sociological liberals. As their name suggests, okay, they emphasize on a social relation. So after sociological liberals, another school of thought we have in liberalism, that is called interdependence liberals. Interdependence liberals, they mainly talk about the trade, pay particular attention to the economic ties of the mutual exchange, and they talk about that trade is something which makes the states more dependent upon each other, and when states they get more and more dependent, obviously they get away from the war. So interdependence liberalism, they mainly talk about the trade, they talk about the free trade, free flow of money, free flow of goods, and another title we used for the interdependence liberal is globalist. And let me clear one thing here, that globalism and liberalism, they both are same. Especially globalism and interdependence liberalism, they both are same. They both talk about the free trade of goods, free movement of goods, services and capital. Another offshoot of liberalism is institutional liberals. They talk about the strengthening of the international organization. They talk about the importance of the international organization. They talk about the international regimes. And they believe if we have more international institution, it could lead to a more peaceful world. And institutional liberals, they also talk about the institution of a world government, and they believe that gradually these international institutions, eventually they can come out in a form of a global government in somewhere in future. So after institutional liberals, another school of thought which is also famous, especially in post-Cold War time period, that is a Republican liberals. They argue that liberal democratic institutions and forms of the government are vital for the international peace. And when 2 to 3 lectures back, we talk about the clash of civilization, okay, and the end of the history. In both of the theses which were presented in a which were presented in a post-Cold War time period, they emphasize on the promotion of a liberal democracy. So Republican liberals, they talk about promotion and spread of the liberal democracy. So let me repeat the four main offshoots of liberalism. First is sociological liberals, which talk about social contact. Another variant of liberalism is interdependence liberals, which talk about the trade. Then we have institutional liberals, which talk about the international organization. And last we have Republican liberals. They try to promote liberal democracy across the world. If we look at the earlier writings of the liberals, then in 17th century philosopher John Locke, and then we have another utilitarianist, Jeremy Bentham. John Locke, he mainly talk about the international law, and he talks that how can we regulate wars and how can we avoid wars. So to some extent he provided a foundation for our international law. And then we have utilitarianism, utilitarianist Jeremy Bentham, who believe that happiness is a end goal of individuals or human beings, and states, they were formed to serve the interest of the human beings, and the primary interest of the individual or human beings is their happiness. So states are formed to make the people happy, and they are supposed to serve the individuals. So Jeremy Bentham, John Locke, these two scholars, we take them as a early liberalist. New liberalism, basically a variant of a liberalism or a camp of a liberalism, okay, which introduced by the Joseph Nye. New liberals, they basically presented, they become famous in a end of the Cold War era in 1980s, when Robert Cohen and Joseph Nye in 1984 they published their books, and they talk about the concept of complex interdependence. Basically Joseph Nye and Robert Cohen, okay, they challenged the idea of realists that state is a primary actor. They believe that state is not the only actor which shaped the international system, and they negate the realist claim that state is a primary actors. They believe that all the actors, they have important role in shaping the international system, and all the others actors, they are also important, like states. And they believe that if all the actors collectively they are shaping international system, so eventually it creates a complex interdependence. In other words, everything is linked with everyone. States, they are linked with the international organization, they are linked with each other, and then it's individual, and it's the international law, the concept of the human rights, trade. In other words, everything we have, okay, in this world, whether it's states or non-state actors, they collectively shaping international system, and this create not only interdependence, a complex interdependence. When we talk about the interdependence, generally interdependence only refers to an economic relation which exists between states. But when we talk about the complex interdependence, another terms which we used in liberalism, which we frequently used in liberalism, is complex interdependence. Complex interdependence is a little bit different than interdependence. Complex interdependence is not confined to the economic relation or the trade relation between the states. This notion believes that states, they are culturally engaged with each other, they are morally engaged with each other, they are religiously engaged with each other, they are in terms of economic relations, they are engaged with each other. So states, they are not only engaged on an economic sphere, they are engaged with each other on a many spheres. So this idea is known as complex interdependence. So this was a short overview of liberalism. So we discussed two mainstream theories of realism and liberalism. Today I'll try to convey to you in a more easy manner. I'm signing off at this moment. Allah Hafiz.